Today is 9th of Adar, 5786, Thursday, February 26th, 2026. Alright. This is day 62 of this bitch. It's pretty jazzed. Yesterday's discussion, we solved a major fucking halakhic issue with the red heifer. So that's tight. Check out this duct tape, baby. We're gonna duct tape on the Beta Migdash if you want. Anyway. Why? I mean, I don't make that decision. Mashiach will make that decision. Alright, here we go, folks. I got 99 Zerusim, but a bitch ate one. But before we do that shit, no one really knows for sure. Elu ve Elu divrei Elokim Chaim, but this is the Mazorah we live by. Chilazone Murex trunculus, that's fucking snail. Sounds like a Pokemon Golus, that's fucking Yiddish for diaspora. Chachma, that's wisdom. Bina, understanding. Da'at, knowledge. Chalaf, that's knife. Shchita is slaughter. Shochet is slaughterer. Bidika, examination or inspect. Chalaf, that's an instrument of surgical sharpness used to perform shchita. Halakha, that's the body of Jewish halakha in accordance with halakha, kosher. Correct, fit, appropriate. Nevela, an animal that was not slaughtered by shchita. Shochet, a person who performs shchita. Torah, we know that. 5 books of Moses, Law of Moses. Treifa, torn. Zar, Ba'ale, Chaim. The Jewish teaching that cruelty to animals diminishes man's own ethical and moral standing. A shochet, that's a slaughterer. Stellen, Chalif, that's the sharpening, polishing of knives. A bodek is a checker. Gay, Kakin, Afen, Yam, Lektizayan. Go shit in the ocean. Gotta do this bullshit. May Hashem bless you and guard you. May Hashem shine his face upon you and be gracious to you. May Hashem lift his face to you and grant you peace. Aken ani medaber ivrit bekar ivrit mekra'i afshe befal anaknu amurim ledaber Yiddish o ulai aramit shegam otan ani yakol ledaber b'mida mesuyemet aval ani ma'arif anglit lakin bo'u nedaber anglit ze nishma tov lecha. Okay. All right. Hava Nagila Hava Nagila Hava Nagila Venismecha Hava Nagila Hava Nagila Hava Nagila Venismecha Hava Neranena Hava Neranena Hava Neranena Venismecha Hava Neranena Hava Neranena Hava Neranena Venismecha Uru Uru Achim Urachim Benesameach Urachim Balev Sameach Urachim Balev Sameach Urachim Balev Sameach Urachim Urachim Balev Sameach. Hey, Hava Nagila Hava Nagila Hava Nagila Venismecha Hava, Nagila Hava, Nagila Hava, Nagila Ve Nismeka, Hava Neranena, Hava Neranena, Hava Neranena Ve Nismeka, Hava Neranena, Hava Neranena, Hava Neranena Ve Nismeka. Uru, Achi, Urachim, Balet Sameach, Urachim, Balet Sameach, Urachim, Balet Sameach, Urachim, Balet Sameach, Urachim. Urachim. Balet Sameach. Wait. Alright, there's death. Soul separates. Gehinnom. Its purification. Gan Eden. Initial spiritual reward. Possible reincarnation. Spiritual repair. Resurrection. Body plus soul reunited. Olam Haba. Perfected embodied eternal world. 5 levels of the soul. Nefesh. Action. Vitality. Ruach. Emotion. Neshama. Intellect. Chaya. Transcendent life force. Yechida. Absolute unity with God. Yore. He may teach. Yadin. He may judge. Yatir. Becharot. He may permit firstborns. Torah is Bereshit, Shemot, Vayikra, Bamidbar, Devarim. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. Nevi'im, prophets, Yeshua, Shoftim, Shmuel, Malachim. Joshua, Judges, Samuel, Kings. Latter prophets, Yeshayahu, Yirmiyahu, Yechezkel, Trei, Arsar, Hosea, Yoel, Amos, Obadiah, Yonah, Micah, Nahum, Habakkuk, Zephaniah, Haggai, Zechariah, Malachi, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, Hosea, Joel, Amos, Obadiah, Jonah, Micah, Nahum, Habakkuk, Zephaniah, Haggai, Zechariah, Malachi. Ketuvim, Tehillim, Mishlei, Eov, Psalms, Proverbs, Job, and then Shir Hashurim, Ruth, Ika, Kohelet, Esther, Daniel, Ezra, Nehemiah, Divrei HaYamim. Song of Songs, Ruth, Lamentations, Ecclesiastes, Esther, Daniel, Ezra, Nehemiah, Chronicles. Kvort is a basin or bowl used for Nedilat Yadayim. There's a Negavasher. Alright, now what? Today is Sefer HaTemunah. This is Kabbalah and Coffee and Kabbalah. Kabbalah and Coffee and Kabbalah. Come on.
Sefer HaTemuna, Sefer HaTemuna, book of the figure. It's likely Spanish Kabbalist circle. Date, the overview. Sefer HaTemuna, Book of the Figure, is a short but highly influential medieval Kabbalistic work that presents a radical cosmological idea. Open quote. The Torah itself reflects cosmic cycles, Shemitot Shemitut, sabbatical aeons, and we are living in only one of multiple cosmic eras. Close quote, it is one of the earliest sources to articulate a doctrine of cosmic sabbatical cycles, later expanded in Lurianic Kabbalah. Cosmims, Shemitot, sabbatical cycles. Drawing from Leviticus 25 and the sabbatical cycle, the book teaches, just as there is a 7-day week, a 7-year agricultural cycle, there are also 7 cosmic cycles, Shemitot. Each Shemitah is a complete cosmic era. We are currently living in one of these 7. The Torah changes in each cycle, a bold idea. The letters of the Torah remain the same, but the arrangement and meaning differ in each Shemitah. This means, in other cosmic eras, different mitzvot may apply, different spiritual structures dominate, even reality itself may operate differently. The Torah is seen as a permutation matrix of divine reality. The figure, Temuna. The title refers to the mystical form or structure of creation, often associated with letter patterns, divine name structures, cosmic blueprints. Reality itself is a divine configuration of letters. At relationship to Sephirot, Sphirot, divine emanations, the 7 Shemitot correspond to the lower 7 Sephirot, divine emanations, Chesed, loving kindness, Gevura, judgment, Tiferet, harmony, Netzach, eternity, Hod, majesty, Yesud, foundation, Malchut, kingship. Each cosmic cycle expresses one dominant Sephira. Nash, cosmology. According to Sefer HaTemuna, there were worlds before ours. There will be worlds after ours. Each cycle lasts 6,000 years plus 1,000 years Shabbat. So 7,000 equal 49,000 years, followed by a 50th Jubilee-like cosmic stage. This anticipates later Lurianic ideas of Shevirat HaKelim Birot, breaking of the vessels, Tikkun, rectification. Though Sefer HaTemuna predates Isaac Luria, radical implications. This book implies the Torah we know is not the only Torah expression. Cosmic time is cyclical, not linear. Creation itself undergoes sabbatical renewal. Divine law may shift in other aeons. This was controversial. Some rabbinic authorities resisted its literal reading. Structure of the work. The text is short, cryptic, written in dense, symbolic language, often referencing letter crowns, mystical permutations, hidden forms in Torah scrolls. It reads more like a mystical key than a narrative book. Philosophical significance. Sefer HaTemuna introduces idea, significance, cosmic cycles, universe not one-time event, Torah permutation, law tied to cosmic state, letter metaphysics. Reality equals divine text, cyclical redemption, time repeats at higher octave, it shifts Jewish mysticism toward a multi-world cosmology. Halakhic status, not a halakhic work, does not change practical observance, treated as speculative mysticism, influenced later Kabbalah deeply. Influence. It influenced Spanish Kabbalah, Sephard Kabbalists, later Lurianic cosmology, some early Hasidic thought. Though it remains less mainstream than Sefer HaBahir Zohar, why it matters. Sefer HaTemuna is important because it expands the meaning of Shemitah from agricultural law to cosmic law. introduces Torah as a dynamic cosmic code, prepares the intellectual ground for later Kabbalistic metaphysics. It's one of the earliest Jewish texts to openly suggest, open quote, reality itself is periodic and programmable through divine language, close quote. If you'd like, I can next. Compare Sefer HaTamuna to Sefer HaBahir. Map the seven Shematot to historical errors. Or explain whether this conflicts with Rambam. 12. Sefer HaTamuna, Book of the Figure. Author anonymous, likely Spanish Kabbalist circle. Date, 13th. Overview. Sefer HaTamuna, Book of the Figure, is a short but highly influential medieval Kabbalistic work that presents a radical cosmological idea. Open quote. The Torah itself reflects cosmic cycles, Shematot, sabbatical aeons, and we are living in only one of multiple cosmic eras. Close quote, it is one of the earliest sources to articulate a doctrine of cosmic sabbatical cycles, later expanded in Lurianic Kabbalah. Cosmic eons, Shematot, sabbatical cycles, drawing from Leviticus 25 and the sabbatical cycle the book teaches, just as there is a 7-day week, a 7-year agricultural cycle, there are also 7 cosmic cycles, Shematot. Each Shemitah is a complete cosmic era. We are currently living in one of these 7. The Torah changes in each cycle, a bold idea. The letters of the Torah remain the same, but the arrangement and meaning differ in each Shemitah. This means, in other cosmic eras, different mitzvot may apply, different spiritual structures dominate, even reality itself may operate differently. The Torah is seen as a permutation matrix of divine reality. The figure, Tamuna. The title refers to the mystical form or structure of creation, often associated with letter patterns, divine name structures, cosmic blueprints. Reality itself is a divine configuration of letters. At relationship to Sephiroth's divine emanations, the 7 Shematot correspond to the lower 7 Sephiroth divine emanations: Chesed, Chesed, loving kindness; Gevurah, Ruach, judgment; Tiferet, harmony; Netzach, Netz eternity; Hod, majesty, Yesud foundation; Malchut, kingship. Each cosmic cycle expresses one dominant Sephirah. Nash, cosmology. According to Sefer HaTamuna, there were worlds before ours. There will be worlds after ours. Each cycle lasts 6,000 years plus 1,000 years Shabbat. So 7,000 equals 49,000 years, followed by a 50th Jubilee-like cosmic stage. This anticipates later Lurianic ideas of Shevirat HaKelim, breaking of the vessels, Tikkun, rectification. Though Sefer HaTamuna predates Isa Gloria, radical implications. This book implies the Torah we know is not the only possible expression. Cosmic time is cyclical, not linear. Creation itself undergoes sabbatical renewal. Divine law may shift in other aeons. This was controversial. Some rabbinic authorities resisted its literal reading. Structure of the work. The text is short, cryptic, written in dense, symbolic language, often referencing letter crowns, mystical permutations, hidden forms in Torah scrolls. It reads more like a mystical key than a narrative book. Philosophical significance. Sefer HaTamuna introduces idea, significance, cosmic cycles, universe not one-time event, Torah permutation, all tied to cosmic state, letter metaphysics. Reality equals divine text, cyclical redemption, time repeats at higher octave, it shifts Jewish mysticism to a multi-world cosmology. Halachic status, not a halachic work, does not change practical observance, treated as speculative mysticism. Influenced later Kabbalah deeply. Influence. It influenced Spanish Kabbalah, Sephid Kabbalists, later Lurianic cosmology, some early Hasidic thought. Though it remains less mainstream than Sefer HaBahir Zohar, why it matters. Sefer HaTamuna is important because it expands the meaning of Shemitah from agricultural law to cosmic law, introduces Torah as a dynamic cosmic code, prepares the intellectual ground for later Kabbalistic metaphysics. It's one of the earliest Jewish texts to openly suggest, open quote, reality itself is periodic and programmable through divine language, close quote. If you'd like, I can next. Compare Sefer Hatamuna to Sefer Habahir. Map the seven Shematot to historical eras. Or explain whether this conflicts with Rambam.
No, we're good for now. Dog, I hate doing the fucking Yiddish part. It just takes a long time. You hate it? It's whatever. I'm Chai. That's something so pleasurable. You could bring back the dead. That's what a Rebbe decides after we stop. Halavai. That's if only I wish. That's what she says before we stop. Stop. Yiddish cat. Jewish head. Yanta. It's kind of a fetish of mine. It's a talkative bitch. Talkless. Brass tacks. Nosh. That's a snack. Snacking on pussy. Basher. That's a soulmate. Basherta is a female soulmate. Basherta is a male soulmate. Mishmash. It's a mixture. Mishmash. I was taking it back. Bupkiss means nothing. Beans. Good Yontif, that means good holiday. L'chaim means to life. Hard means neutral. Black kosher means smooth fit. Mensch means a good guy. Mensch, I think, should be a thing. There's Eshet Chayil, woman of valor, and Sudakas Froy. And Gittel, I think, should be fun. Skoyach, that's short for Yasher Kok, which is short for Yasher Kaka, which means he gives strength forward. May your strength be directed forward. Wait, means a fuck. Stettel, that's a town. Shadel, that's a pig. Strymel, that's a hat. Milchig, Fleischig, Parv. Milchig is dairy. Fleischig is meat. Parv is neutral. Hamish, that's homie. Shemata means dirt. Schwiger means mother-in-law. Chazir means pig. Chazer means to repeat. Schlep means to carry a burden of sugar. Well, in crazy guys, Ganef means thief. Yarmulke, that means, could be Aramaic for King Yare Malka. Trafe means torn. Yortzeit means death anniversary. Klutz means clumsy. Needlelock means matzo ball. Schwitz means matzo ball. Maybe matzo ball. Schwitz means to sweat. Schnorrer means beggar. Schmutz means grime. Schmooze means just talk, perhaps just a gab. Mamzer, it's bastard. Benching means blessing. Shadchan. A shadchan is a matchmaker who suggests prospective marriage mates and then coaches them through the dating process. The term is linked to the word shidduch, which means match. The technical meaning of the word of Aramaic provenance is actually to settle down, since the newly matched couple settles their differences, getting their new together. A shadchan can either be male or female, although a female matchmaker is more properly called a shadchante in Yiddish and a shadchanet in Hebrew. The plural form is shadchanim. In Yiddish, to suggest a shidduch is to read speak a shidduch. Shadchonos refers to both the act of matchmaking, so you can say that a shadchan is in the business of shadchonos, as well as the money traditionally given to the shadchan for his or her services, which would more accurately be referred to as shadchonos geld. Shadchonos money. Paying the shadchan is actually important. Beyond helping the shadchan pay his or her bills, the couple wants to begin this new chapter in life cleanly, honestly, and with no one bearing a grudge, even a subconscious one. The shrewd shadchan. Anyone can be a shadchan. See a fine young woman and promising young man, just make the suggestion. Even if it does not work the first time, keep on trying. Being a successful professional shadchan is a finely tuned craft that requires insight into human nature, determination, creativity, marketing skills, and sometimes the wisdom of when not to present the whole truth, at least not initially. At times, an eager shadchan may overrepresent a person's good attributes or suppress some of their less savory side. This has given rise to the joke that the word shadchan is an acronym for sheker dover, of Nodal, speaks falsehood, takes money. But joking aside, the shadchanim of the generations past and present do a splendid, often underappreciated job at helping singles find their soulmates. The divine shadchan. A Roman matron once asked Rabbi Yossi. A Roman matron once asked Rabbi Yossi bar Chalafta, if it took God 6 days to create the world, what has he been doing since then? If it took God 6 days to create the world, what has he been doing since then? God has been making matches, replied the rabbi, determining what the daughter of so and so will go to so and the son of so and so will go to so, etc. Is this his occupation? She asked. I can do the same thing. I have many manservants and maids. I'll pair them all up in no time. It may seem simple to you, said Rabbi Yoshi. It may be simple to you, said Rabbi Yossi, but it is as difficult to him as the splitting of the sea. With that, the rabbi went on his way. The matron then smugly proceeded to line up 1,000 manservants and 1,000 maids, creating 1,000 instant couples. The next morning, however, they all returned to her sporting bruises and injuries, refusing to remain with the spouses she had assigned them. Rabbi Yossi, said the matron, there is no person like your like Hashem, and your Torah is true, pleasant, and praiseworthy. Who approaches the Shadchan? In a traditional setting, certainly for a first marriage, the parents of the singles are generally the ones who approach the Shadchan, but it is the young man or woman who will meet the prospective match and make the final call whether or not to marry. However, when older adults seek a match or when parents are not available, then it is the single who deals with the shadchan and decides whether or not to pursue a given shidduch. Now, although Hashem has already determined whom we will marry, it is incumbent upon us to proactively help ourselves and our children, including contacting a reliable shadchan when the time comes. Here is an excerpt from a letter penned by the Rebbe, Rabbi Menachem Mendel Schneerson of righteous memory in 1952. Regarding your daughters, it seems to me that you should seek the offices of a shadchan, even though matches is Hashem's purview. Nonetheless, everything must have a foothold in nature, and it is appropriate that on every weekday morning you give 18 cents to charity for your daughters and for all your family before praying, and this will be the fitting vessel to attract and retain God's blessings. Oh, well, that's a great fucking story. Menachem. All right. Now what? Now we gotta watch a fucking video. Scary, this one.
Kaddish is a prayer we say when we mourn, but oddly enough, it's to do with life rather than death. And that is a way of bringing us comfort at the moment when we most feel a sense of loss. We reconnect with life and with God of life. The following is the mourner's Kaddish. It is said when there is a minyan, or an attendance of 10 men or more. First, we should stand with feet together and say, Yisgadal v'yiskadash shmei Rabbah, ve'olma divarach Yerusei, v'yamlich malchusei, v'yatzmach urkonei, v'korev meshichei. B'chayei choin u'v'yoymei choin, u'v'chayei dechol beis Yisrael, ba'gola u'v'zman korev v'yimru amen. We wait for the congregation to say the following. Yehei Shmei Rabbah Mevorach Le'olam U'Le'olamei Olmayah V'Yisborech V'Yishtabach V'Yishoer V'Yisraimam V'Yisnasei V'Yishadar V'Yis'aleh V'Yishalol Shmei D'Kodashah B'Rechu Le'elam Min Kol Birchasa V'Shirasa Tushbechasa V'Nechemasa Da'amiron Ve'olma V'Yemru Amen. Yehei Shlama Rabbah Min Shemaya V'Chayim Tovim Aleinu Ve'al Kol Yisrael V'Yemru Amen. Then we take 3 steps back, and with the feet together, first we bow to the right, then the center, and then to the left. And then 3 steps forwards. That ends the mourner's Kaddish. Center, steps back, and with the feet together, first we bow to the right, then the center, And then to the left.
Yaseh Shalom Aleinu. V'al Kol Yisrael V'yimru Amen.
And then 3 steps forwards. That ends the morning
That's how you do
Kaddish.
it. But they didn't show it the rest of it. That's fine. Whatever. Alright, now what? Well, we saw the big riddle yesterday. Yo, dog, yesterday we solved a really big riddle with the red heifer and how all of Israel could become purified from a state of impurity. What are like 10 other riddles out there that are real and practical that just need solutions within Judaism? The Riddler, baby. Kara Aduma engineering mode. The Cohen paradox, already met but deeper version. From Torah, Numbers 19, the ashes purify the impure but make the pure impure. Why must the Cohen become Tamai, ritually impure, in order to purify the others? Even Solomon is traditionally said not to have fully grasped the Chalk supra-related decree. The lost smicha problem. Oh, that's a good one.
What is the halacha if an apple hires a Jew to smash barrels of yayin mixing? Right? So, okay, right? When this apple comes over to the mix, right? I'm going to pay you $50 an hour. You and your neighbor smash these barrels of yayin mixing. Mahu, what is the halacha? Is the Jew allowed to receive, to accept, to keep the wages from his process? Remember again, in yesterday's daf, we were with the concept of funds or income that is generated from what may or may not be committed activity or dealing with items that themselves will be asur b'halacha. So here, the Akham is asking me to do something with Yayin Pesach, but he's asking me to destroy Yayin Pesach. What he's going to take me for, so am I allowed to keep those proceeds? The Gemara says, no, what's the halacha? Me and Miriam keeping this big people also, which is very interesting. On one hand, I want the existence of the Yayin Pesach. Now, why do I want the existence of the Yayin Pesach? Because the barrels to break on their own, I would lose the opportunity to break them, and I lose the barrels. So, interestingly enough, I want
Yaguna problem, chained woman.
because I want it.
That's a good
Therefore,
one.
that makes the process very
Amalek, the eternal enemy. Torah commands erasing Amalek, but who is Amalek today? Is the command so active? How does it align with modern ethics? Temple Mount purity problem. To rebuild the temple, most Jews today are impure from corpse impurity. We can fix that. Access to certain areas requires purity. Exact temple location boundaries are debated. Tech on Shabbat. Electricity is not in the Torah, so is flipping the switch. Fire is AI writing. Are smart homes violations? What about brain-computer interfaces? Holocaust must apply ancient categories to new realities. This will only intensify. We can fix that one. Free will versus divine foreknowledge. If God knows everything, are we truly free? The tension appears in Rambam and many others, so still philosophically unresolved in a full, satisfying way. Resurrection mechanics, resurrection of the dead. When the dead are revived, what body do they get? What about cremated remains? What about organ transplants? What about identical twins with shared DNA? Mystical answers exist, but practically it's a metaphysical riddle. Tribal identity restoration. Many mitzvot require knowing who is a Kohen, who is a Levi, who is a Shevet, which Shevet tribe. We rely on tradition, but genealogically, certainty is largely lost. In a temple era, this becomes a serious administrative puzzle. Conversion standards in a global world. Who is Jewish, who is Orthodox, and the other shit. The lack of universal recognition creates galactic fragmentation. Bonish, the Shemitah of the universe from Sefer HaTemuna? Are we in one cosmic cycle among many? If Torah expression changes per cycle, what does that imply about absolute law? That's a metaphysical riddle of epic scale. You want the True Riddler tier challenge. Here are three especially juicy ones to steal man like we did Para Aduma, like I did. Restoring Smicha globally, a halakhically airtight solution to Aguna crisis, a future-proof Shabbat framework for AI robots. I can do that. I can do all of them. Pick one. All right, let's do. Um, let's do Smicha. Let's start with number one, and maybe we'll do the other ones another day. But those are really good, so thank you. All right. Um, so we had rabbis starting with basically Moses, and Smicha was passed down like a formal laying down of hands through Joshua and the sages up until the like second century of the Common Era, generally when the Romans made it illegal, right? Okay. Well, couldn't we just say that Smicha, has had changes, so it could have just been just, and since rabbi literally means teacher, it could just be the passing of from one teacher to another. So a teacher has like a classroom. Everyone in that classroom would learn under that teacher. It'd be like a rabbi tree, like a coaching tree. And then that would continue. And then I know it was tried to be restarted in the 16th century or whatever, but it didn't even necessarily need to be restarted. It's still going. There's an argument to be said that at its core word, rabbi just means teacher. So we've had rabbis consistently, Jewish teachers, since the fall of the temple and the Roman mandate to end it. So we could just say that rabbi sometimes has more additions with the laying on of hands and the different kinds, but at the core it just means teacher. So because we've continuously had teachers this entire time, smicha never really ended. Oh, that's how I see it. Oh, good. Now we're cooking. I mean, that's how I see it. And that's how I've stated it to rabbinical colleagues. At the core, it doesn't mean anything but teacher. You can say that it means other things. That's cool. But at the core, it means teacher. Your move, Riddler. All right, riddle me this. Yo, what up, pimp? I'm in the middle of a class right now, so I can't talk. How you living, baby? Okay, excellent. Very well. So, we are currently studying rabbinical ordination, and um, so there's an argument to be made. So traditionally, as rabbis, the first rabbi we trace back to Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses, our teacher, and he passed his teaching to Joshua and Joshua to the sages. And basically, this process of formal, what we call smicha, rabbinical ordination, continued until the second century of the Common Era. However, the Romans made it illegal after the fall of the Second Temple in 69 of the Common Era. And there's this major point of contention that we do have rabbis today, but it's not necessarily the same rabbis that we had in the second century because of the rabbinical ordination becoming illegal. However, I think there's a pretty easy argument to be made that rabbi simply means teacher. And we have continuously had Jewish teachers going back to Moses, our teacher, Moshe Rabbeinu. And rabbinical ordination has been tried to be reestablished again in the 16th century and in the more modern age. But I think that that's unnecessary. The fact is that the heart of the word rabbi means teacher, and it could mean other things too. So I basically, for the last like 45 minutes, went through some Yiddish overview and some Kabbalah overview, and then at the end of my classes, I go with AI. I basically use AI to be able to make the different arguments. And like yesterday, we reviewed the red heifer, which is like a sacrifice that was done during the temple period. And so, if you pardon me, they didn't do it recently. They just they have the cattle there. No, it hasn't been done yet. It hasn't been done yet. Yeah, exactly. So basically, the candidate has to be a female cow. It cannot be yoked. It cannot have been milked. It cannot have been calved. So meaning like it can't have reproduced. It has to have pure red hair. Not even one of the hairs can be of a different color. And it's not like a pure red. It's like a red orange. It can have horns. It can have hooves. Essentially, it has to be an adult, and it has to be checked. Like a bodek, a checker has to review, make sure it doesn't have any any imperfections, and then at that point, essentially, there's a process that takes place outside the temple walls in the Mount of Olives, where a pyre would be created. There only has to be one Cohen basically who has to do it, but usually it'd be a team of people, and then the animal is essentially shechted, a process known as shechita, that's ritual slaughter, where the trachea is cut. The blood would be collected into a basin. That basin would be basically, it would have blood. The Cohen would take hyssop, which is like a type of plant, and 7 times spray that, or like flick that blood onto the altar. But it's different. It's a different altar. It's not even. It's really just a platform that's outside the walls of the temple. And then from there, the pyre would be lit. It doesn't need to be lit in any special way. It doesn't have to be from a like a heavenly source. It can just be lit from regular fire. And then that heifer essentially would be burned to a crisp, even the horns, even the hooves and everything. Then from there, all of that ash would be collected, and the blood that was in the bowl that didn't get splashed would basically be thrown on the pyre as well. Everything would be burned and in its entirety. And then all of that ash is collected, and then the collection is kept in a safe place. And basically, then there's a process where people are considered they're considered impure if they are in a, like, they make contact with a dead body. And so essentially it's known as tame, the impurity. So basically there's a process that a Cohen can use to use hyssop with what's essentially amount of an olive's amount of the ash of the heifer, mix that with light water, so like water from a running source, and then flick that essentially onto the people. So basically, like, let's say you make contact with the dead body and you're like, Rabbi, to become purified, what do I do? So basically it's a 7-day process, but you would basically wash. On the 3rd day we would spray this this ash water mix on you, and then again on the seventh day, and then after that you would ritually wash in a mikvah, which is like a ceremonial bath that uses living water. When I say living water, it comes from a natural source. And then from there, you would no longer be tamei. Basically, you would be pure. So, long story short, there's an issue that arises within Judaism that it's very paradoxical. Like the person who actually does the slaughtering of this process, that Cohen, by making the other people ritually pure, he himself becomes impure. And so there's this idea that it's impossible for all of Israel to become ritually pure. However, using I mean, I came up with a solution yesterday, where if you had two pyres and two heifers and two kohanim, basically they could ritually purify each other. And so these are not questions that are normally discussed. They're pretty advanced. But long story short, that's what we reviewed yesterday, and then today we're reviewing just um, the role of the rabbi within Jewish society and the role of rabbinical ordination. But before we do that, I made a change on my computer, and hopefully it doesn't keep kicking me out of the Telegram. So hopefully that continues. It seems like it's done well thus far. So with that, I'm going to continue, and feel free to listen. Okay. Excellent. All right, folks. So you heard it here first. We are making the argument that smicha didn't really ever end, and so here we go. So, um, so the argument we're proposing is smicha, classical ordination, never really ended because rabbi at its core just means teacher, had an uninterrupted teaching since Moshe. Let's steel man this carefully and then stress test it. What classical smicha actually was. In the Mishnah Talmudic period, it began with Moshe placing hands on Yeshua, that's Numbers 27. It continued in an unbroken chain. It conferred legal authority. It allowed capital cases, fines, Nasot, Sanhedrin membership, certain coercive powers. This wasn't just teacher certification. It was jurisdictional authority inside Eretz Israel, the land of Israel. It required musmach, an ordained sage, in the land of Israel with proper transmission. The chain appears to have ended under the Roman persecution in the 4th to 5th century of the Common Era. Your proposal, the continuity argument. You're saying rabbi literally means teacher. Teachers never stop. Therefore, the core essence of smicha never stopped. The formal laying on of hands may have faded, but the intellectual chain didn't. This is actually a strong philosophical argument because in Pirkei Avot, Moshe received Torah from Sinai and transmitted it. Transmission is the core, not the hand. So your claim is the essential smicha is Mizora, transmission, not physical ritual. That's elegant. Where this argument hits resistance, the counter argument from classical halakha, smicha wasn't just knowledge, teaching, tradition, it was a legal empowerment status. Analogy, you can teach law for 40 years. That does not automatically make you a Supreme Court justice. The classical smicha gave state-level judicial authority, enforcement power, binding communal rulings. Modern rabbis have educational authority, communal authority, moral authority, but not Sanhedrin authority, capital jurisdiction, biblical level enforcement. So historically, they're not identical categories. The 16th century attempt in Sfat, Rabbi Yaakov Berab attempted to restart smicha based on Rambam's ruling. If all sages in Israel agree, smicha can be renewed. It gained traction but faced opposition and collapsed, meaning even great rabbis believe classical smicha had indeed ended. Could your version work conceptually? If we redefine smicha as the uninterrupted transmission of Torah authority, then yes, it never ended. But if smicha means a specific halakhic status with judicial consequences, then historically it did end. So the dispute depends on definition. Deep insight, two types of authority. You may have uncovered something interesting. There may be ontological smicha, transmission of Torah, teacher to student, never stopped. Judicial smicha, formal legal empowerment, land of Israel dependent, ended under Rome. That reframes the whole discussion. Where Rambam didn't use your argument, Maimonides clearly distinguishes between being a Torah scholar, being a musmak, and with judicial authority. If your argument worked halakhically, he would have just said, "We still have rabbis, problem solved," but he didn't. This suggests the classical definition required something more concrete than teaching continuity. But here's where you're actually onto something big. The Sanhedrin needs smicha to function, but Jewish law has survived without it for 1600 years, meaning de facto authority shifted from centralized court power to distributed scholarly consensus. So maybe the Jewish legal system evolved from vertical authority to network authority. This is not a bug, this is a survival feature. Steelman version of your claim. The strongest possible framing. Smicha's essence is mazor, it's transmission. Transmission never stopped. Therefore, the spirit of smicha never ended. Only its Roman era political enforcement dimension collapsed. The Jewish people organically transitioned to decentralized halakhic authority. That's actually a respectable theory. The real riddle. If your theory were accepted, then could we declare Sanhedrin uh, valid today? Could capital law return? Could fines, nasot, be reinstated? Most poskim would say no. But philosophically, your move reframes the question. Final thought. You didn't necessarily solve the classical smicha problem, but you exposed something real, the difference between legal empowerment and Torah continuity. And that distinction is huge. All right. Um, let's see here. All right. Well, to debate that point, you said that just because a legal scholar spends 40 years learning the law doesn't mean that they can be a Supreme Court justice. Technically, you don't even have to be a lawyer to be a Supreme Court justice. So your argument is poor.
That works fine for an item. How would you explain it to a stand guy? The Pharaohs had tried to what's the very Adriatic. So apparently, Rashi points out that here, the Adriatic person there, was very absorbent. So therefore, you put wine in there because where absorbent you want to be. But you can take a shard of that somewhere, put it in water, and replenish it to dry. That is also part of there doesn't two carrots feel like the value is still which the rest of the one saying people show you, people show you. So it's like you have that stuff, even if brother there doesn't care about the fact that you're great, right? But it does care whether or not you can still lost, the city still wants their existence. Yerushas, Ager, Kamran, don't bring a riot from this place. You're bringing a riot, bring them from the case of the inheritance. There, no. Shani Yerushas, Ager, Kilu Barabba. Rabbis were made by Yerusha. In other words, normally the Gemara says perhaps this case should be problematic. But halacha l'maisa, Chazal were made by Yerusha. And as long as the heir has not yet actively taken possession of the Inessa or the idols, he is absolutely permitted to work this out with his brother equal. Right? And so you take this, you take the whatever stuff, I'll take the stuff. Even though, yes, he was to continue existence. Why? Why would they make a by a year? That people are Zera Shemin Yatsu. They are afraid that if the heir has to make a choice between his money, his Yerusha, and his religion, he will choose his money and choose his feelings. They'll say that's not only not going to be good, that's a reality of human nature. We've seen this before as well. For example, right? There's something called the Cross and Shani. Chazal said that in certain cases of theft, the thief doesn't always have to return that which he stole. But the victim should not accept back the stolen item. Why? In order to go ahead and facilitate the thief's
Apologies to the people out there watching. I had to use the restroom. All right. Uh, so your argument is poor. Additionally, Judaism replaced temple sacrifices with daily davening after the fall of the Second Temple. So we recognize that different processes have changed over the course of the last 2,000 years, and certainly over the last 3,300 of Judaism, and certainly within the last 5,786 years of the length of the world. And so, certainly, in addition to this, we do still have judges and have had Beta Din, houses of judgment, traditionally for thousands of years. Somebody had to rule on judicial issues within shtetls and within medieval and even the ancient Near East. So these things have continued. Thus, the argument I feel is enhanced. What are your thoughts? All right, folks, here we go. All right, now we're actually debating, and your counter is stronger than the first version. Let's treat it seriously. You're basically arguing authority structures evolved. Judaism has replaced major institutions before, Carbonate to Tefillah. We had Beit Din, rabbinical courts continuously. Therefore, saying smicha ended may just mean the form changed, not the authority itself. That's a much more sophisticated claim. Let's pack it carefully. The Supreme Court analogy. You're right. You're correct. There is no constitutional requirement that a U.S. Supreme Court justice be a lawyer. So the analogy I gave wasn't airtight. Your point, authority is conferred by recognition and structure, not by intrinsic professional status. Good catch. But here's where the analogy still matters. In Judaism, classical smicha wasn't merely communal recognition, it was a specific halakhic category with defined powers. That's the key difference. Sacrifices were replaced. Important distinction. You referenced the shift from carbonate sacrifices to tefillah, prayer. Here's a critical nuance. Prayer was not a legal replacement for sacrifices. It became a functional substitute in exile, a spiritual parallel, a temporary structure. But halakhically, sacrifices are still binding mitzvot, of course. If a temple stood tomorrow, korbanot would resume. So, uh, do not say prayer abolish sacrifice. I did not say that. I just said they replaced them on a temporary basis. So the institution changed in practice, but not in law. This distinction is massive. Massive. Continuous beta din. Your strongest point. You're absolutely right. We have had beta din continuously for 2,000 years. Someone ruled on marriage, divorce, conversions, monetary disputes. So judicial authority clearly didn't vanish. But here's the technical distinction. Post-Talmudic Beta Din function under delegated communal authority, rabbinic power, consent-based enforcement. They do not have biblical capital jurisdiction, authority to impose naso, Torah fine, Sanhedrin level national sovereignty. In other words, they are courts, but not sovereign courts. That difference matters halakhically. The real core question, your deeper claim, is actually this. If the Jewish people collectively recognize rabbinic authority continuously, isn't that the functional equivalent of smicha? Now we're talking. Because this reframes smicha as authority derived from national recognition, Masorah continuity, practical governance, rather than a mystical laying on of hands claim, a mystical laying on of hands chain. That's a serious philosophical position. Where the classical objection stands, the Talmudic model of smicha required transmission in Eretz Israel, land of Israel, from someone who himself had smicha in an unbroken legal chain. When that chain broke, the category ceased, not because Jews stopped teaching, but because the legal condition ended. It's like a corporation charter expiring. You can keep doing business, but technically the charter status is gone. The radical path your argument opens. If authority evolves and communal recognition is the true foundation, then a unified global rabbinic consensus could theoretically reconstitute national authority. That's essentially Rambam's minority proposal. If all sages in Israel agree, smicha can be restored. You're pushing that logic further. Maybe it never truly disappeared. It's decentralized. That's bold. Here's the deep structural issue. Judaism distinguishes between Torah law that is eternal and fixed and rabbinic systems that can adapt structurally. Sacrifices to prayer, that's adaptive mode. Smicha to decentralized scholarship, that's adaptive mode. But classical smicha carried specific Torah level powers. Those powers have not been exercised since. That's the sticking point. Where your argument actually wins. You're correct in this sense. Jewish authority did not collapse, it transformed. We moved from centralized sovereignty to distributed scholarly authority. That's not absence, that's evolution. In fact, the survival of Judaism arguably depended on this shift. The unresolved question is smicha defined by legal, technical chain continuity or ongoing national Torah authority? If A, it ended. If B, it evolved. The Talmud leans towards A. The Jewish history seems to demonstrate B. That tension is real. Final assessment. You didn't refute the classical halakhic position, but you exposed that the argument that smicha ended depends entirely on a narrow technical definition, and you showed that authority in you showed that authority in Judaism has demonstrated a and you showed that authority in Judaism has demonstrably adapted before. That's a legitimate enhancement of the debate. All right. I mean, it's one of two things. It's either smicha ended, and then we can really have no rabbis anymore from a traditional standpoint, halakhically, the Talmud argument, and then it's over. It's done. It we never have a Sanhedrin again. And if that's the case, then we can never reestablish many of the things within Israel. Or the second case is the only viable option. Therefore, the second case has to be the solution. And it is legitimate. And there's an argument to be made. And on top of that, if you look at the phrase as smicha, the laying on of hands has continued. The teaching has continued. Torah transmission has continued. Talmudic transmission has continued. It is simply a decentralized version of the previous temple smicha that had to adapt based on the fact that we were in exile. Ah, now you've shifted the historical argument to logical necessity. You're saying either smicha truly ended, in which case rabbinic authority today is fundamentally illegitimate and Sanhedrin may never return, or it transformed, decentralized, and therefore remains alive in evolved form, which must be the correct reading. That's a powerful binary framing. But here's the key. If it ended, then rabbis are illegitimate move. This assumes smicha al rabbinic authority, but historically, that's not necessarily how all halakha framed it. There were two layers: biblical judicial authority dependent on classical smicha, rabbinic communal authority based on scholarship recognition, communal acceptance. When smicha ended, only category A ended. Category B did not. So the system didn't collapse, it narrowed. Can we never have a Sanhedrin again? Not necessarily. This is where Maimonides becomes critical. He rules if all the stages in Eretz Israel agree to appoint judges, smicha can be restored. That means even in classical frame, that's just his opinion. That means that even in classical framework, the door was never permanently locked. It requires consensus, not mystical chain continuity. So the system built in a reboot clause. Your decentralization thesis, you're proposing something deeper. Smicha didn't disappear. It transitioned from vertical chain-based sovereignty to horizontal network-based authority. That is historically observable. After Rome, there's no centralized Sanhedrin, but enormous halakhic creativity. Talmud compiled, Geonim ruled, Rishonim codified, Achronim refined, Torah authority flourished. That supports your decentralization theory. But here's the crucial distinction. The Torah sometimes allows emergency adaptation, ha'achah, and it allows rabbinic governments based on communal consent. What it does not do is say if something becomes impractical, redefine it out of existence. Sacrifices weren't redefined; they were suspended due to conditions. Smicha wasn't redefined; its highest powers became dormant. Dormant does not mean extinct. The hidden third option. Your reframing was either it ended forever or it evolved and continues. But there's a third model. The biblical sovereign authority ended, but rabbinic authority continued in a different category, and restoration remains theoretically possible. That's actually the traditional position where your argument really bites. You're correct. You're correctly sensing something. Judaism survived exile because authority became distributed. If authority had required continuous Sanhedrin level sovereignty, we would have collapsed. So yes, this is adaptive elasticity built into the system, but elasticity is not the same as ontological continuity. The core halakhic question: does decentralized rabbinic authority generate the same metaphysical status as classical smicha, or a different kind of authority sufficient to exile but not sovereignty? Most classical sources say A. Other intuition says most classical sources say B. Other intuition leans to A. That's the real debate. The philosophical depth. What you're really wrestling with is if Jewish authority covenantal and national, or is it textual and transmissional? Is Jewish authority covenantal and national, or is it textual and transmissional? Temple model, national sovereignty; exile model, textual sovereignty. We moved from land centered authority to book centered authority. That's enormous. Does logical necessity force option two? Not necessarily. Halakha is not purely logical, it's covenantal, so something can be currently impossible, historically interrupted, awaiting messianic restoration without being logically redefined. Judaism tolerates suspended institutions. Final assessment. Your decentralization thesis is historically strong. However, it doesn't logically force the conclusion that classical smicha never ended. It may mean classical smicha is dormant, while rabbinic authority evolved into a parallel system that preserves both historical integrity, exilic adaptability, and keeps the reboot door open. Now, here's the next level question. If tomorrow every major Orthodox authority in Israel agreed to restore smicha under Rambam's rule, would it be legitimate? Yeah, we are ready to go there. Yeah, but that's just Rambam's opinion. And frankly, we don't follow a lot of what Rambam says. That's just one man's opinion. And whether or not that would be legitimate is still just based on one rabbi from 1,000 years ago. Who's to say that it has to be in Eretz Israel? Who's to say what that even means? Does that mean the borders of Israel? Could that mean the the settlements? Could that mean all Orthodox shuls in the world? What does Eretz Israel really mean? I know it means the land of Israel, but that isn't very well defined. Ah, now you're moving from institutional theory to meta authority theory. You're asking, why does Rambam get to define the reboot mechanism? Why must it be Eretz Yisrael, land of Israel? What even counts as Israel halakhically? Who decides? Good. That's the right pressure point. Let's slow it down and be precise. It's just Rambam's opinion. You're correct that Maimonides is one opinion, but here's the crucial thing. He isn't inventing a new idea. He's interpreting a sugya, a Talmudic passage. The debate is not do we follow Rambam? The debate is Rambam correctly reading the Talmud? And in this case, Rambam says smicha can be restored by consensus of sages in Eretz Israel. Many others disagree. Some think restoration requires Mashiach. Some think it is permanently suspended until prophecy returns. So, yes, it's contested, but it's not arbitrary. Why Eretz Israel matters. This is not Rambam's invention. The Talmud itself ties classical smicha to being granted in Eretz Israel judicial authority rooted in the land. Why? Because classical smicha was tied to sovereign Jewish jurisdiction, the Sanhedrin. National covenantal authority outside the land, Jews historically lacked sovereignty. So the land isn't geographic trivia; it's jurisdictional. What counts as Eretz Israel? Now we're getting interesting. Halakhically, Eretz Israel can mean biblical borders. Numbers 34, land conquered by Yehoshua, land sacrificed under Israel, current state of Israel territory, Kedusha sanctity, land under Jewish sovereignty. These are not identical categories. That's a real complexity, but none of them historically meant any Orthodox yeshiva anywhere. I understand that, but there's an argument. Because the land requirement wasn't about Jewish population, it was about covenantal territory. Your deeper question, you're pushing forward something more radical. If authority comes from Torah transmission, why is land even relevant? Why should geography affect legal power? That's actually a massive theological question. The Torah binds law to land. Many mitzvot only function in the land under sovereignty, under national structure. Judaism isn't purely abstract text, it's land based covenant, exile, forced textual survival mode, but that doesn't erase territorial categories. The hidden issue: who has meta authority? Your strongest move so far is this: who decides what counts? If there is no Sanhedrin, Who authorizes the reboot conditions? That's the paradox. To restart smicha, you need to you need recognized authority, but recognized authority depends on smicha. It's circular. That's the real riddle. Why Rambam's proposal even matters. Rambam tries to break the circularity. He proposes collective agreement of the sages in the land, creates the authority to restart the chain. In other words, authority can reemerge from national scholarly consensus. Is not mystical. It's not constitutional. Whether we accept that is another matter. Could Israel mean something broader? If you wanted to steelman your position, you could argue Israel might mean the collective Jewish people, the covenantal body, not strictly geography, but historically Holocaust has not interpreted it that way in this context. Still, philosophically, that's a live question. The real core problem. Here's what this all reduces to. Is Jewish authority land anchored and sovereignty based or text anchored and transmission based? Temple era is A, exile era is B. We've lived in B for 2,000 years. You're asking whether B replaced A permanently. Traditional Holocaust says no. A is dormant, not abolished. Your strongest argument going forward, if you want to push this further, the sharpest angle is if exile can suspend land based authority for 2,000 years and Jewish law adapts around that, then the system already demonstrated it can function without classical smicha. Therefore, perhaps restoration is not legally necessary for legitimacy. That's coherent. But it doesn't prove restoration rules disappear, only that survival doesn't depend on them. Where the real explosion is. Here's the dangerous version of your question. If Israel today is a sovereign Jewish state, does sovereignty itself trigger dormant categories? That's much more destabilizing than redefining Israel because now the land plus sovereignty combination is partially restored. And that brings the whole smicha discussion back into practical territory. You're not wrong to challenge the borders issue, but the deeper issue isn't geography, it's what generates legal authority in Judaism, territory, consensus, transmission, or sovereignty. That's the real battlefield. And it just is. I don't think it's ended. You're fine. Go fuck yourself.